Welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogram Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. I follow my guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us. Hello and welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast. I am Dr. Supatra Tovar, and I am so lucky to have Integrative Nutrition Coach and Sparking Wholeness podcaster Erin Kerry with us today. Welcome, Erin. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Me too. We are pod swapping. I was on Erin's pod and then she agreed to be on mine. So I just feel super fortunate to be able to pick her brain this time. So I'm going to read a little bit about Erin and then we're going to get right into our questions. Erin Kerry is a certified integrative nutrition health coach and owner of Sparking Wholeness, a nutrition coaching company. After teaching middle school English for 11 years, she transitioned to focus on her passion for holistic health and wellness. Once diagnosed with bipolar disorder, Erin has firsthand experienced the importance of connecting mind, body, and soul in her approach to health. Through her work, she empowers individuals to become their own health advocates, addressing topics such as trauma, gut health, genetics, body image, and the challenges of motherhood and parenting. Erin also hosts the podcast, like I said, Sparking Wholeness, where she discusses various health issues with experts from diverse fields. I was one of them. She's an amazing host. It's a great podcast. I really recommend you go check it out after you listen to Erin. Erin, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And your episode was so much fun. It was one of those episodes where time just flew and we kept talking. I thought, oh no, we should probably do a part 2 on this. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, we're very like-minded, which I enjoyed.
Yeah, we are. We have like same brain for sure. So I want to know about this personal journey of yours, starting out as a middle school English teacher, then becoming a nutrition coach. Tell me about that journey and what led you to coaching.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because it's really at the root. It's very similar. I became a middle school teacher. Really, I started out in high school, didn't last long there. Middle school was more my speed. The kids are all just like silly and goofy and in between, childhood and young adulthood. But the main reason I wanted to be a teacher was because of my own struggles with my mental health, starting from my middle school years on through high school that lasted through college. And I had an English teacher who saw through the face that I was putting on, who saw through my overachieving, overactivity, over committing to everything, and reached out and said, hey, it seems like you're really struggling. And she picked up on it through my writing, of course, like an English teacher would. And that really stood out to me because I had worked so hard to put on a mask to separate what was going on inwardly and what was going on with the suffering that I was experiencing inside and how I presented myself outside. So that the fact that she saw through really spoke to me and made me go, wait a minute, I want to be that person. Because once I came out of that experience and kind of was on the journey to healing, and it was a very rocky path, it was like, well, I want to be that person for kids. And so it started out for the same reason that I do what I do now with coaching, because I very soon found out, right, that especially with teachers in the teaching world, adults are also struggling with their mental health, and adults are struggling with feeling overwhelmed and overcommitting to things and being overscheduled and not really being able to stop and take a breather. Teachers specifically, I know I sometimes lump teachers and nurses in the same category because they're so in it for people, but they don't even stop to go to the bathroom, right? Mm-hmm. So I went into coaching about 11 years into my teaching career, mostly just because I was going to stay home with my third child. I was having a third baby, and I got involved in the health and wellness industry, and I started promoting just some of what I had been doing for my mental health in social media. And I got a lot of really good positive feedback from that, and realizing, wait, people need these tools. People need the tools that I've found to help bring relief to symptoms. I mean, I can say now that I've been symptom-free from I was diagnosed with PTSD first, then depression, then bipolar disorder, all by the time I was 18. And so I am now walking symptom free from those things, as symptom free as you can be from PTSD. But I'm definitely walking symptom free from bipolar disorder and depression for close to 15 years, maybe longer. Sometimes I joke, ask my husband, because we've been married for 15 years, and he always says, he's a trauma therapist actually, and he always says, I've never really seen you hypomanic. I've never really seen you depressed. He's seen like a seasonal depression sometimes kick in for me, and just me feeling very overwhelmed, but he's never seen me extremely unstable. So I've definitely been in a good, solid place, living symptom free for over 15 years. So that's, that answer was very multi-layered. So
but it certainly is a journey, and it takes a lot to get to where you are now in terms of feeling symptom free and just thriving. If you could give a picture, as much as you feel comfortable, what do you think were the factors that led to these diagnoses?
So many factors. And I think just for listeners to hear that it's never just one thing. I think sometimes we get caught up in this, especially now as functional medicine is getting more popular. People are like, I want to find the root cause, right? As if there's one. There are so many layers. And my story is a very multi-layered story. And even stemming from childhood and infancy, I struggled. My mom would say I was just a sick baby. I struggled with ear infections all the time. I had colic. I was very emotionally reactive, even as a baby. And I was very sensitive to my environment, even as a baby and as a young child. Now, I think I may have qualified. Looking back, I could have qualified probably for an ADHD diagnosis also early in elementary school. But, they didn't diagnose girls with ADHD back then. I just knew I was really sensitive to people, to input, to not getting enough sleep at night, to food. I had ruthless sugar cravings. At one point, I always joke about this. By the time I was in high school, at one point I had 8 Boston cream pie Dunkin' Donuts in one setting. I wasn't even full. I just kept eating them. It was this strange, I just had this insatiable desire for sugar and sweets. I don't know if I was looking for serotonin or dopamine, or even if there's something going on with my gut. I had had rounds and rounds of antibiotics all throughout my childhood, lots of strep throat. If anybody's familiar with the term psychoneuroimmunology, I believe that there's a lot going on, even something to the extent of maybe a PANS or a PANDAS dynamic for me. If anybody's familiar with that, it's just kind of that neuroinflammation created by high viral load. I believe that contributed. And then I experienced, I would say, a big T trauma. When I was 9, I watched my grandpa die of anaphylactic shock in my front yard. And that was one of those situations where my brother, my sister, and I, we all watched it happen. I was 9, they were 7, they're twins. And every single one of us, and I know you'll appreciate this for sure from a psychology perspective, every single one of us was impacted in a different way. My sister did not really experience PTSD symptoms, kind of got over it. As I say get over it very loosely, right? Like she recovered, she bounced back, she was resilient. My brother and I really struggled. And so I think that there are even some dynamics there just based upon our makeup, whatever that is, whether it's genetically or nutrient wise, or maybe some previous trauma that we inherited in our DNA. Who knows, right? But we both really struggled. So for me, I was just having a lot of depression pop up between 7th and 8th grade and flashbacks from that event. And I couldn't watch certain movies where characters would die. I still struggle with that. There are certain movies that, like, my husband and even my kids know, they're like, if there's a death in it, mom can't watch it because it just takes me back. And that's when I first entered freeze mode and I started dissociating. And so that freeze mode and dissociation turned into depression. So around that same time, I was having hormonal imbalances and I was put on the birth control pill. And in order to suppress my cycle so that I would not have such strong periods, so that I wouldn't be anemic, all the reasons that a lot of times they'll put young girls on the birth control pill. Well, we do know now, we have the studies that it increases anxiety and depression, specifically for teenage girls, for all women, but a large portion of teenage girls are affected by this. And so for me, within a year of that, my depression just got worse. And I will say, for people who don't know, the birth control pill depletes B6. B6 is a crucial cofactor for creating serotonin and dopamine. But the birth control pill also can impact enhanced intestinal permeability. So I likely already had some gut issues, maybe some gut brain dynamics gone awry because of all of my antibiotics that I had been prescribed as a young child. And so then you throw in the birth control pill and deplete me of B6 and mess with the gut. And it was like, well, pretty soon they put me on. I think the first antidepressant I was on was Zoloft. And Zoloft, and this will tie into what we probably will be discussing in a little bit, but Zoloft caused me to gain about 25 pounds within a year. And so, so you just keep adding to these layers of, I just felt like I couldn't catch a break. And even with the Zoloft, I still struggled with depression. I still crashed. I still had these periods of extreme go, do and achieve. And then on the weekends, I would just lock myself away, dissociate, read fiction for hours and hours, and reading and writing. And that's why I ended up wanting, like I said, to be an English teacher and study English literature. It became an outlet for me to take me away from the real world. But there were a lot of struggles along the way. Even through high school, I still struggled with immune health issues. I was sick. My senior year of high school, I know for sure I was absent at least once a week because my friends, they made a little card for me to put on my desk when I was absent, and they just called it Erin's off day. It was Erin's off day because they knew I was either tired, I was, my throat hurt because I had chronic strep things going on. I mean, it was just wild. So by the time I was a freshman in college, I was diagnosed with mononucleosis, but I could not slow down. That's when I started experiencing symptoms of hypomania. And I would stay up for all hours of the night. And I think looking back again, when we look back, we see things so clearly, right? But I do think that there was for sure some brain on fire dynamics going on. I think my immune system was over signaling to my brain. There was probably some overactive immune activity at the brain level that was creating these hypomanic episodes. And I was very self-destructive. Eventually, I found out that I could, once I got on medication, the heavy duty psych meds, I could self-medicate with alcohol and really just kind of take myself out of my body until I ended up finding myself pregnant my senior year of college. And that was the ultimate wake up call, like, oh my gosh, what is going on? Now I really need to figure out what to do. Somehow I made it through college okay, but my social life, my inner critic was very, very loud. I felt so broken. I felt angry that I had been given what I thought I had been given gifts to write and to achieve academically and to get involved in activities. I felt like I had all these gifts and abilities that I could not use because I was broken, because my brain couldn't work right. And it was extremely frustrating. And I know so many people are experiencing this right now, right? And especially our teens are suffering from this. And so I thought I was alone at the time. Now we're seeing an abundance of this, but I didn't know anybody else growing up that struggled the way I did. If they did it in secret, It wasn't as talked about. I didn't know anybody else taking medication. I definitely didn't know anybody else on lithium or Depakote or Tegretol or these extreme psych meds that many of them cause me to hallucinate or have terrible side effects or things like that. So that's kind of I'll pause there. I will say getting pregnant with my daughter, even though I thought that was like the ultimate worst, scariest thing that could happen to me, because I had to get off of my meds at that point to have a healthy pregnancy, it ended up being the thing that saved my life.
Wow. There are so many layers to your history. And you have really kind of identified a lot of the stressors, a lot of the difficulties that you faced, a lot of the pressures, especially as you were getting into college. And now, when you can look back, you can look at it from a nutrition lens.
Oh my goodness.
When you examine your childhood, and I think that this is so important when we are counseling parents in how to take care of their child in terms of what nutrition to provide them, what do you feel like you might not have had enough of or too much of when you were young?
I'm so glad you asked that because I really believe that food is mood. I think we can't build a healthy brain without healthy cells, and you can't have healthy cells without the right nutrients. And I think I was chronically nutrient deficient. And the question is, Was it because of maybe a gut microbiome that wasn't digestion wasn't optimal, maybe, or maybe I ate too fast, or we could talk about all those factors. But for sure, I ate the standard American diet growing up. I had the Pop Tarts. And this was, I'm in my 40s. So this was the 80s where this is just how things were. I think there were some parents out there at that time that knew a little bit more about nutrition, but my mom, she'll even laugh now. She's like, there is no Facebook. How would I have gotten this information? Except we knew dieting, we knew diet culture. They knew maybe what not to eat, or if something was fattening, which is always a funny phrase, right? Because who knows what that means. They knew Diet Coke was out there. It was just, by the time it was the 90s and I was middle school age, everything was like, well, eat a lot of bagels and popcorn and potatoes and eat mostly refined carbs because then you lower your fat. Well, I think about how our brains thrive on good healthy fats like omega-3s. I probably never got omega-3s, right? I don't think I got things like avocados, or I'm thinking like any of the good sources that would be fueling, nourishing to the brain. Leafy greens, that wasn't happening. If I had salads, it's because I was dieting and I was trying to drop a couple pounds, but it was like very flavorless, not enjoyable food. I thought healthy food didn't taste good. And of course I say healthy food loosely because maybe I'll say nutrient dense food. I thought nutrient dense food didn't taste good. I wanted to eat what felt good in the moment, that gave me fuel in the moment, or turned my brain on maybe from a dopamine serotonin standpoint, but there wasn't a lot of staying power. So I was just constantly hungry for sugar and sweets. And that's what I ate, especially by the time I got my driver's license. That's all I ate.
Yes. So if you could have gone back and coached your mom, what would you tell her would be the most important thing for both physical and mental health?
Yeah, gosh, I would say I would talk to my mom about learning to make vegetables more flavorful and tasty, because I love flavor. Give me all the flavors. Give me the salt and the garlic powder and the pepper and the paprika and I would suggest that because I think that would have been helpful. I did enjoy, and she did try to feed me a lot of eggs. And I think at that point there was some nutrient density thinking there. We've talked about this, and I felt pretty good eating eggs. But yeah, eating a lot more. I joke. I think the phrasing now is called being an ingredient household, right? Like where you have a whole lot of ingredients on hand to make things, not necessarily processed packaged things. So, and I ate a lot of cereal for breakfast. That's one thing for sure. I if I'm going to, have a hill to die on as a parent myself, it's like, we got to have something other than cereal for breakfast, because that's just spiking blood sugar really, really high, really fast, and then dropping it down really fast. And that creates mood dysregulation.
Yes, I would say that, moms from the 70s and 80s were swept up in the convenience craze that
Yes.
came at that time. You had a lot of, like, that's when Hamburger Helper
Yep. Yep.
came out, and you
Rice-A-Roni.
had like rice-a-roni, and you would make meals from Campbell's soup.
Mm.
Remember how you'd
Oh,
like make a
yes.
casserole from your Campbell's
Rolls.
soup cans?
Mhm.
That was a time when I think it was touted as this innovation and convenience, and to make moms' lives easier. So we can
Mm.
never blame them for
Right.
that. That was the
Right.
product of some really good marketing, just like we're
Totally.
seeing all throughout the ages. You've
Mhm.
seen in the 50s, the marketing was different. It was just like, how could you be the perfect housewife? And how much
Mhm.
time can you put in to making these homemade meals? 70s and 80s were like, women were starting to get out there and work, and they didn't have all that time to home make their
Absolutely.
bread
Yeah.
and do things like that. So to have the convenience foods were really helpful. And they were
Mhm.
also, convenience foods were kind of touted by like astronauts and stuff. We would like, oh, well, the astronauts use this food. Oh, Tang, we should probably
Mhm.
feed that to our
Mhm.
kids too, because they're so healthy. So we have had a
Right.
lot of influence coming from food corporations that influenced your mom. So
Mhm.
it's really good to know what you would tell her now, and just how sensitively you might inform her about what we know about nutrition and how it affects both physical and mental health.
Yeah.
So I want to transition a little and find how the podcast came into being for
Mhm.
you. How did you create this? How did you get it going? And how did you make it successful?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think something that is so important to bring up first is the shame that comes with the stigma of a diagnosis like bipolar disorder, because it is a disorder that people joke about like it's weather, right? Like this person's just crazy and they're going to flip moods out in an instant. That's not how it was for me, right? But I still lived with the shame. I mostly, and at the time when I was diagnosed, they didn't distinguish between bipolar 1, bipolar 2, but I think I now looking back, I mostly probably identified with that heavier depressive episodes, but then I would have those brief periods of hypomania. I didn't have extreme mania unless it was induced by a substance, which happened with marijuana, and or it was induced by a virus or something like that, like with the when I had mono. And so there's so much stigma that came with that diagnosis that even when I was teaching, I for sure did not want a principal to know that that I had bipolar disorder, right? Like I didn't want to be that person with the label on, because people are people, and most people don't even know what bipolar disorder is, and they're just going to make a quick judgment call. And that's what we do as people. It's a very human thing. And so it was hard for me. I would maybe mention I struggled with depression here and there to people, or I would call it anxiety, because hypomania could maybe look a little bit like anxiety, right? So I would say things here and there because I am a very vulnerable person and I have struggles, and that's just a big part of how I share and how I relate to other people, is that I am not exempt from struggles. But I never really went public about anything until it was 2018. I started sharing my story. And at that point, I felt like my symptoms had stabilized enough to where I could share about it and it wouldn't be super triggering for me to even get any kind of weird, because I've gotten a lot of really interesting responses when I started sharing about my struggles. It's amazing what will fill your inbox when you get that vulnerable, right? And one person was, I've been accused of being anti-medication, even though I was medicated for 18 years. One part of my story is that I'm not. I've been med-free for over 10 years because I've been able to find stability with other tools. But I have to say that very carefully because I don't want anyone to think that there's something wrong with them for taking meds. I don't want people to think there's something wrong with them when the meds don't work, right? Like it's such a nuanced topic. So I didn't start sharing until 2018. And when I shared, I received all sorts of input, but mostly positive. It was mostly positive. People wanted to know more. People wanted to learn what I had done to keep my symptoms in essentially remission, and what daily habits I was incorporating to feel so good for such a long period of time, because that's not always talked about. We hear the horror stories, right? We hear the dark sides of depression, the dark sides of bipolar disorder. We hear about the epidemic and how many people are struggling. Like I even referenced it myself a minute ago. So many teens are struggling, but we're not hearing the hope. I think it's really, really important to hear that just because you struggle with something that's a quote mental illness, it doesn't mean that you're going to suffer from it for the rest of your life, right? And for me, I was told I would always struggle, and that's just not true. And so I experienced a massive wave of positive feedback when I started sharing, and then I started digging into things more, because at that point I had already gotten my certification from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. And then I was like, well, I got to learn more. So I started my podcast essentially because I wanted to learn more. I wanted to interview people like you. I wanted the education, and I wanted to get like up close and personal with the experts, because what better way? And it was really, so I started the podcast fall of 2019. And it was spring of 2020 when COVID hit. And that's when the topic of mental health, of course, started getting a little bit more front and center situationally. And so it blew up from there. And that was really amazing. I was able to be more picky about selecting my guests and finding out, really streamlining, this is what I want to talk about. I focus a lot on just anything mental health related, but whether that means hormones, because our hormones as we age as females, that's going to impact mental health, but it could be specific issues that are root causes. It could be, I interviewed somebody recently about it was chronic fatigue, but she called it myalgic encephalitis, neuroinflammation. And so just getting really nitpicky about topics has been fascinating for me. And so the podcast has just been an amazing outlet for me to learn, but also to share more stories of hope and healing, because there are so many people out there who are sharing, yes, we can heal, but not everybody is hearing that from your regular news sources. So that's been really amazing. I ended up getting another certification from the School of Applied Functional Medicine, which just taught me more about the interconnectedness of all things in the body, that of course the brain and the body are not separate, and what is the interplay with hormones and nervous system and detoxification and gut health and circulation, and how are we all just a complex spider web of symptoms and causes and issues, and how can we unravel that and learn to again, essentially create an environment for healing. Because it's not that we can't heal, we just don't always have the environment for healing, right? And that is mind, body, spirit related. So that's where, so then I ended up, I guess I'll end on the fact that I do have a book coming out in September. So that's going to be my newest way. So I've got the podcast, and I did the blogging thing as well. I have some things on my blog, but essentially the book was kind of the culmination for me of like, how can I put all of this that I've learned and everything in my own personal story in one place? So that's another outlet coming out soon. Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about that. I really want to get into that in depth in the second part of this episode, but we're out of time for this one. I just want to say that yes to all of it. I love podcasting for the same reasons. I love to pick people's brains and learn and learn and learn. And that's how you and I are complete sisters in this way. And I think it's such a wonderful way to just open up and communicate and, just delve into subjects that you just don't have that much education in, and then really learn. That's what people can get from these podcasts as well. So I'm so happy to hear your journey all the way to this point. And we are definitely going to dig into that book because I really want to know what that's all about. Please tune in next time for the second half of this amazing episode with Integrative Nutrition Coach and Sparking Wholeness podcaster, Erin Kerry. Thanks, Erin.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the ANEW Insight Podcast. Please remember, the contents shared on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. You can find us anywhere podcasts are streaming, on YouTube at my.anew.insight and at anew-insight.com under the ANEW Insight Podcast tab. And follow us on our socials at my.anew.insight on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more updates. Tune in next time and evolve with us.